recommendation would look like if we were to bring that forward.
This is what our clerk has written for us to consider. That staff be directed that using 100% provincial funding CHIPPY dollars to commence an RFP process to include the positions of intake/diversion worker, emergency housing program worker, housing support workers, bracket 2, housing stability bank administrator/landlord, mediation and outreach worker, and data homelessness prevention program manager. That are the 7 positions that would be sought with an RFP. That's how I read this. Heidi?
Mr. Mayor, we would request that the program manager position not be included in the RFP. So we would be looking for 6.
Okay, so it'll be 6, not 7. I'm going to ask for a mover and seconder, then we can discuss it. It has to be a motion for us to debate it. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Geisens. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wells. Now we do have a resolution on the floor for these 6 positions that staff would be directed using 100% CHIPPY dollars to start the RFP process. Councillor Height and then Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I have a question to just that last sentence that Heidi said. The program coordinator is not included in this? Well,
She's asked that the homelessness prevention program manager not be RFP'd for. Do you wish to comment on that? Heidi, please, to Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, through you to council, in the original staff report, staff suggested to council that we would need an internal staff person to manage this portfolio because it has gotten so big. Regardless of whether we issued an RFP or not, it was only in the RFP option, it was always our intention that the frontline staff would be included in the RFP and not the program manager. We are not asking for that tonight. We will have to go back and take a look at our internal resources and see how we can continue to manage this program or come back to council.
I'm confused by that statement, Mr. Mayor. When we hire people, we need that position. When we sub it out, we don't. And yet it was supposed to be that it was more efficient if we hire people, and now there's a surplus position that we cut immediately. I don't know how it can change on the fly just like that, and all of a sudden we required 8, and now we're down to 6. I like the math on that, but I just don't know about the whole structure in 2 seconds how we could drop a position by outsourcing it. And if that was the case, maybe we should have knew that before. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Do you wish to respond or not?
If council chooses to reread the report, council will see that in either option, the request or the identified need is to have a manager employed by the Corporation of Norfolk County to oversee this increasingly large and complex program. So an internal hire, one of them no matter what. With respect to the others, the request was for a maximum of 8.0, and you will recall that as an attempt, and because we haven't gone down this path as yet, the theory was the last person to be hired would be an administrative support, an administrative assistant, and we didn't know whether that would be a full-time or a part-time job, so that would take it up to 8, 7, 7.5, or 8. So that's that one swing job. Regardless, there is still a need for a manager. However, council has this evening had a vote and very clearly declined the option of adding staff in this area. Accordingly, staff respect the will of council. Staff are not immediately turning around and then saying, even though, notwithstanding the fact that the consultant identified the need for a manager on staff, notwithstanding the fact that staff agree with that assessment, that there's a need for a member of staff, we assume it will be appropriate to bring that to budget for your consideration at that point in time, that one manager position. But that's how the math goes from 8 to 6, because there's one that's needed no matter what on staff, one management position, and in the last position, we were going to wait and see whether that whole program with the 7 other staff generated enough work for an administrative assistant, whether that was part-time work, full-time work, what have you. Some things you can't know until you cross the bridge. But that was the attempt. The fact that you're now looking at an RFP does not change any of the analysis or any of the numbers. We say 6 because we don't know whether any party that might RFP, hopefully there is at least one, would need an administrative assistant, but that can be up to any party that bids. So 8 to 6 is not actually a change because the one was conditional. The one was going to happen regardless, and the other, we were going to wait and see the need for the administrative assistant. That is 8 to 6.
Now I'm worse off, Mr. Mayor, because we've been running this program for a while now, I take it. And the whole problem was they weren't spending enough money. But there was never a mention that we don't have staff here. Maybe that was our problem then, that the Salvation Army never really knew what to do. Because if they've been doing it for a while, which has been years, I'm assuming, somebody had to be their point person over at county. So now we mandatorily need a person to run the program that's been running for all these years, and the major problem was underspending. I'm lost, Mr. Cribbs. How has this program been magically running all these years on its own?
Before I was employed here last year, council received the consultant's report. I am informed and verily believe that you thought it was good work and that it received appropriate commendation to that equivalent. Earlier this year, you received the report that references that and chooses to go forward with it. Within the context of those reports, you've had analysis and fulsome explanation for how the programs are offered, the level of programming, how it continues to grow and increase, how the province has increased the amount of funds it's provided, but also astronomically increased the number of tasks that needed to be performed. You have also been informed that we seem, as far as we can tell, we run the leanest ship in the province of Ontario, that we are the outlier in not providing these services directly to our citizenry, in using third-party delivery agents. That we're now in a very, very small minority in the province of Ontario in that regard. But at any rate, we have 1.2 people in housing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Cribbs, we have 2.2.
2.2. I am wrong. Stand corrected. We have 2.2 people to offer all housing services.
To both counties.
To both counties. That's correct. The consultant identified the need, whose report you accepted and received last calendar year, and it came up with 2 suggestions, and this report this year is acting on that consultant's report. So none of this is new. This has been discussed, received, and considered by this council on multiple occasions. It is not a rabbit pulled out of a hat. Regardless, we accept your instructions, and if you choose to go forward with the RFP, it would be appropriate for 6, and with the referrals to budget for operating purposes, council will be asked to consider a manager at that time so that we don't suffer on the rules of reconsideration, if that so pleases you.
Mr. Mayor, maybe we shouldn't have went for the lowest bid on that consultant after all.
Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I recall, we all thought around this table that the consultant report was well done, as the county manager has previously just mentioned. So I have no issue with the quality of the consultant report at all. When I put my hand up, Mr. Mayor, it was essentially to say the same thing that Mr. Cripps has said. I, too, recalled from the report that should we make a decision to go to an RFP, staff were, I think, acknowledging that we perhaps part of the, and blame isn't the right word, but part of the reality of this program being underutilized and perhaps underdelivered, and therefore not meeting all of the needs and underspent, was the fact that we were trying to manage an increasingly complex homelessness prevention program along with everything else with the same number of staff that we've had in that division for several years. So I understand the need why staff are suggesting that the manager position would not be part of what we would put out for RFP. That would be something that we would fund within the same funding envelope, within the CHIPI 100% money, but it would be an internal manager rather than an external person, and I certainly support that. So I'm going to support the motion. The part that I'm unclear about, Mr. Mayor, is why in our RFP we would be stipulating the 6 positions rather than stipulating delivery of the following program components. You, who are going to put in your proposals, tell us how you're going to do it. The one exception being perhaps the statistician, the data collection, which you said, or staff said, is a mandated thing. So that would probably be a required one. The others, I guess I'm unclear as to why we're stipulating in our motion and therefore incorporated into the RFP 5 positions versus program delivery. So I'm supporting the motion and I'm going to continue. We must do something, but I'm puzzled as to why that came out that way.
Thank you. Heidi?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Oliver, the consultant's report has brought back a recommendation which we have talked about and accepted for a coordinated entry system with those following positions within it. That is based on the consultant's work in our community and their expertise in the area of homelessness and homelessness prevention as the minimum that we require in Haldimand and Norfolk in order to adequately deliver a coordinated entry system based on a housing first philosophy. Each of the positions within that system is a single position except for the housing support workers, and we are only asking for 2 in order to provide service across both counties. And so we could word the RFP to say a minimum of those specific positions, but it would be staff's very strong position that those specific positions are what are required in the coordinated entry system in order for us to deliver a housing first homelessness prevention program, and that we really could not have a fulsome program for less than that.
Councillor Brunton?
Well, my questioning is similar to what Councillor Oliver's idea was. If we're going to go out with an RFP, I don't really want to know how they want to administer it. I would like a breakdown of it. But I want to see the money that we're spending, and I'm going to use the word 900,000. I want to see more money going into the program. And all I've heard, if I'm correct, is through you, Heidi, is that the program does not supply housing. It encourages by the payment of gas, hydro, etc. bills, so these people can afford housing. And I guess, and I'll reiterate that I don't want to tell the consultant, you need to hire these 6 people. I mean, to me, that defeats the purpose of going out for an RFP. I want to see the money they intend to spend on the program versus how they intend to manage the program. And I don't really care how they do it. If we accept it, if there's somebody available, the county manager says there is nobody available, but I'm willing to take a chance and see if there is somebody available. So, and how they do it is their business, but as far as staffing. Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? I'm going to call the question. Those in favor? Yeah, thank you.
That staff be directed that using 100% provincial funding CHIPI dollars to commence an RFP process to include the positions of intake diversion worker, emergency housing program worker, housing support workers 2, Housing Stability Bank Administrator / Landlord Mediation and Outreach Worker.
All right, anything further? I'll call the question then. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, let's continue. Page 45, Health and Social Services Advisory Committee minutes from their last meeting, which was back in July 25th. Height has moved, Oliver has seconded that the Health and Social Services Advisory Committee minutes of July 25th, 2017 be received as information. Any discussion on those minutes? Those in favor? Carried. On to the Energy Conservation Committee minutes of June 16th, 2017. Oliver has moved. Height has seconded that the Energy Conservation Committee minutes of July 16th, 2017 be received as information. Any discussion? Councillor Wells, please.
Mr. Mayor, I knew this for a long time, that Councillor Oliver is a very special councillor, and that is probably deserving of twice as much recognition as anyone else, and I see that is come to pass. There it is. He's mentioned twice as being present. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver. Well, I guess the one I picked up was July 16th. And just a second, there's just on the motion maybe a typo. I know there's 2 minutes, June 16th, so this is said July. Let's change it on mine to June. Thank you for that. It is June. Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor? That's carried, and thank you for that, Councillor Oliver. Just a little typo on the motion sheet. Now there is one, I believe, for September. Yes, on page 61. It's been moved by Councillor Height and seconded by Councillor Oliver that the Energy Conservation Committee minutes of September the 8th, 2017 be received as information. Any discussion on these? Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Tourism and Economic Development, page 61. It's been moved by Councillor Height and seconded by Councillor Oliver that the Tourism and Economic Development minutes of September the 25th, 2017 be received as information. Discussion on these minutes. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I see on here we had quite the discussion over worker accommodation / bunkhouses. It's very confusing, Mr. Mayor, when you go over all of that stuff. And I see that the committee's actually looking for a couple of motions on page 66. Now, I'm wondering maybe if Mr. Baird could elaborate on some of the ways that planning is dealing with the bunkhouse things. It seems pretty painful. And it looks like it's based on our definitions.
Are you in the next minutes from the agriculture?
What, aren't we on the AG?
Not just yet. We're close. We're still back on page 61, Economic Development.
No, didn't we just vote on that one?
Pardon?
No?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
No, we'll get to you in a second. That's okay. These are the Tourism and Economic Development minutes of September 25th. Is there any discussion on those? Those in favor? It's carried. Okay, we'll go to page 65. It's been moved by Councillor Oliver, seconded by Councillor Height, that the Norfolk County Agricultural Advisory Board minutes of September 27th be received as information. Councillor Height, yeah.
I was just giving Mr. Baird the heads up there, so he's had time to read that report. So, Mr. Baird, can you explain to us, like, why are there so many regulations with this? When I read this, it says here, a farmer can house 4 workers or less in a single detached dwelling. If a farmer wants to house 5 or more workers in a single detached dwelling, regardless of its size, there must be a change of use to a camp of housing for workers. And da-da-da-da-da, like, why the painful process? What if you have a 9-bedroom farm home? You can only put 4 people in it.
Mr. Baird?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Height, yeah, this is what we're struggling with as well. The painfulness is just that. It's the Ontario Building Code that we're dealing with. That's applicable right across the province. Certainly Norfolk County is unique. We know our migrant worker population is significant, probably if not the largest in the province. So we have particularly unique challenges. The Ag Advisory Board have raised this issue. We've talked with them on sidebars during different tours and so on. We know it's an important issue. The issue being, as they acquire farms, if they don't need those existing buildings or dwellings, can they be severed off, or could they be sold for residential or student or tourism purposes? We agree this is something that needs to be explored. So I think we've had some really good dialogue, and our staff have committed to doing some research through the colder months ahead, so that we can maybe make some modifications to our zoning bylaw and our definitions, and perhaps even put forward some suggestions through the Code Commission to make amendments to the Ontario Building Code that would be directly related to on-farm accommodation. So it's being worked on. I'm pleased to see this. I know where you're coming from. We'd like to have an answer ASAP, but I think we've got a really good discussion going, and we look forward to bringing something back to council over the winter months.
Okay, so these 2 motions that are on here will come back to council, or will go back to the committee, or should I be moving these motions right now to get them to come back to us?
Sure. Generally, through the mayor, your advisory committee is making these recommendations to council in their minutes, and staff, when we prepare our report, we will include, further to the motion passed at such and such a meeting. That's really the purpose of the report that would come following. So this is just putting council on notice that you have a motion, a recommendation from your advisory committee wanting staff to work on that, and we will do so unless you direct otherwise. But I think you're certainly supportive of us doing that.
The only issue I have there's no return date. When are we looking for that to come back?
Through the chair, we've got a lot of the home run right now with the zoning bylaw, some of those outstanding appeals, the official plan. These are high priority policy items for us. We've got a commitment from staff. I would suggest you're going to see these in the new year, just getting those things done, and that's certainly appropriate. Our Ag Advisory Board is aware of those timelines too.
Okay, so then my last question, basically, okay, if a farmer has a surplus farm dwelling, which many have several, and they can only put 4 workers in giant buildings, say old farmhouses, for example. Now, I know we had a run-in a while back where a bunkhouse wasn't deemed appropriate, and then they had to put them in motels and things like that. So in the program itself, did they give them a housing allowance for the workers instead? So say you didn't house them on your farm, would there be a housing allowance portion in there?
Through the mayor, I'm not intimately aware of how that program operates at that level. I do know it's the responsibility of the farmer, the host, to provide appropriate accommodation that meets all those requirements that our health unit checks for. Certainly the example in here, we do have farmers that go above and beyond what would be required, which is great to hear. But the example that you cited, they were living in a facility that was not complete or did not have sufficient servicing to do that. So it did require that farmer to house his offshore workers in temporary accommodations, which were indeed motels. Mm-hmm. But that's since been resolved.
So that would be something that Marlene would answer if she was here?
Through the mayor, we generally we work very closely, as you could attest from the minutes. Health unit does the inspections. We've got fire code, building code, all of these things. We want to make sure that everybody's safe. But to further your comment, just for the rest of council, if we can only put 5 offshore or migrant workers in a building, but you could, in theory, have a family of 9 living in that same house with mom and dad and 7 kids. Where's the difference? So I think that the acts and the legislation do conflict with one another, and that's why we're hoping to come up with a solution that really a made in Norfolk solution, because we truly are unique that way.
Right, like the first thing that comes to my mind is rental properties. You could stack them 3 feet deep as tenants, like for people. There's no limit on that, really, or there's definitely no enforcement from the health. You could have 19 people in a home, and yet here you can only have 4. So you might as well rent it to these people and bypass that whole painful process. It just, there's a common sense disconnect here, I feel. I hope it gets sorted out.
Yeah, staff are in total agreement with your comments. I wouldn't suggest that we circumvent the process. It's about making it proper, appropriate, safe, and that's what we'll be doing. We'll bring that back to you in the winter. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Mayor, just on the same topic, and Chris, I suspect this has already happened, but given the fact that we know we're on the verge of having our OP amendments and updates done and coming back to council, have staff looked at the current and any proposed OP changes, wording specifically on this topic, such that we might do that one first, so to speak, as part of our omnibus approval of the updates to the OP?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's right. The comments back from the ministry are imminent. In fact, we've got a few sort of verbal indications what some of the questions they've got. We've got a date set. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is, in the next few weeks, you'll be getting those comments back. Ms. Elder will be here to run through those with you. Council, until it's finally adopted, Council will have the opportunity to make a final tweak or, test some of those assumptions or comments made by the province. We're talking about something that's probably more in the zoning area as opposed to the official plan. Those concepts, we do have some really great agriculture policies that are there. So there's always that opportunity, to make a zoning bylaw amendment that deals strictly with that accommodation piece. Mary is our expert, and I would look forward to that discussion. So that may be something that this council would like to keep in the back of their mind as a top 3 question to her when those comments come back.
Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Mayor, so I think I heard you say, Chris, that in your and staff's opinion, we don't need to have any further OP amending text to implement the kind of thing you've suggested we will try and do through our zoning bylaw. If we can just deal with it at a zoning level rather than tweaking the OP.
Through the mayor, that's what I understand as well. And again, there's also references to the Ontario Building Code, and there would be an avenue to maybe put that forward to that code commission for changes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Receive as information. Those in favor? Carried. I'd like to move ahead to page 135, please, to our staff reports. Staff report CSD 1733. It's the Port Dover Harbor Marina roadway paving. Mr. Cridlin?
Thank you. Through the chair to County Council. Staff report CSD 1733 is phase 1 of 3 for the paving of the marina internal roads. And as you'll note, this was approved by Council in 2015. However, the work isn't starting until 2017. And the reason behind that was also just the rationale that we weren't sure what we were going to do with the ownership of the marina, things like that, so staff had held off. The report is pretty straightforward with the exception that staff are asking for an exemption to the purchasing policy. The reason behind this request is that the paving for the internal roads was not tendered. CSD staff instead discussed with Public Works Environmental Services Department, the engineering division, who had this summer closed the tender for paving, which was very similar scope, location, tonnage, and CSD staff did not get their request in time to get on this tender. However, in discussions with the successful contractor, Dufferin Construction, they are willing to add this to the paving contract for the same price, tonnage price that was tendered. And as I mentioned, corporate services, support services comment and report, I mentioned that in future, there'll have to be a piggy, or should be a piggy, they would prefer a piggyback clause on this, and I can assure you that in future years, any paving at the marina, CSD staff will work sooner with public works staff to get the internal paving in at time of tendering. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions county council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cridlin. Councillor Wells, please.
Very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Mr. Cridlin. Certainly, since the marina has been in operation, paving has been a priority for the residents or for the users down there, so I thank you for that. And I noticed that, if I read this correctly, it's going to be done in 3 phases. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. Or through the chair, that is correct. The rationale behind that is paving will have to be done late in the year because the boating season, there's still boats being stored into November. And phase 1 will be the, I'll call it the north road and the entranceways. And phase 2, there'll have to be some catch basin work. And phase 3 is based around the new location of the ramp, which is over by where the commercial docks used to be. So we've broken the original $333,000 project into 3 phases, which I think is easier for constructions with tight timelines in the fall.
Okay. And my second question through you, Mr. Mayor, if that would be allowed. I've noticed that you are suggesting that this be done by debentures, and I wondered, it seems to me that the Marina Fund has a surplus. Why would the funding not come from their own surplus as opposed to debenturing?
Through the chair, I'll turn that over to Mr. Johnson, but I think it is now being funded from the reserve.
Mr. Johnson, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Cridlin's correct. In the report, we do mention that we will be funding this project through the reserve.
Okay, not debentures.
Through the mayor, yes, correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Height, please.
Shouldn't that motion be changed then, Mr. Mayor?
I'll
Says
have a
here,
look.
and further that the funding for Phase 1 resurfacing marina roadway parking areas be amended from the issuance of debentures to the Port Dover Marina Reserve Fund? Shouldn't that be fixed?
Come from reserves. Mr. Johnson, the last paragraph of the,
Well, while our treasurer looks at that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like, through you to Mr. Cridlin, 3 phases. I feel like this is a downtown Port Dover rebuild for I don't know how many millions of dollars. Do you think you're going to come under budget for the $330,000 for this project?
Through the chair to Councillor Height, the budget is $330,000, and yeah, we're quite confident now that I'm looking at it, and what it becomes a 3-phase as is this phase, I'll call it as easy. It's strictly paving, no catch basins, no drainage issues. The phase 2, there have to be some catch basins and drainage, and phase 3 hinges on the relocation of the dock. So the dock has to be relocated and opened up before that phase could come through. If we could do it in 2, we would, but I think it's going to be too much considering the tight timelines in the fall.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I'm pretty sure you're still familiar with our roads department, and they do tar and chip. Why wouldn't you bring in our own internal people to do this job?
Through the chair to Councillor Height, when this project was set up, it was for paving, not a tar and chip. I know in the Dover Marina, a lot of larger boats, and they have the, lack of better words, the cradle, which carries the heavy boats out of the water and into the storage areas, and I guess staff decided that asphalt would hold up much better than a tar and chip in that location.
Do you have an idea of what it would cost to tar and chip it as opposed to the $330,000 paving job?
Through the chair, we could do some calculations. Obviously, tar and chipping is a cheaper way to go. However, you don't get the stability of the base and things like that. So operational-wise, paving is a better go in Port Dover.
Right, but according through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Cridlin, according to what you said, they would only need the pavement for the cradle part to move back and forth to basically fix your boats out. So not the whole parking lot. Like, I'm not that happy that the Port Dover Marina gets pavement and my community centers get tar and chip jobs.
Through the
struggling
chair,
here, Mr. Cridlin.
I will turn it over to Lee Robinson in a moment. The paving of the internal roads is just the paving of the internal roads. We won't be paving the whole area of the Dover Marina Basin. And I think Lee wants to comment here.
Through the mayor to council, I think one of the important things that I'm sure that Bill's group's capable of looking at is that depending on tar and chip is really a dust suppression mechanism. It doesn't give any strength to the ground conditions. So one of the things that would have to be considered is what additional work that we would need to do in terms of gravel and bringing up some things and sorting out some things before we were actually able to do tar and chip. So if council's desirous, we can certainly look at it. My recollection from a few years ago when we discussed the project with CSD is that there were some concerns and they needed some additional structural stability that asphalt would bring to it, that asphalt would bring that tar and chip doesn't, because tar and chip is really just a dust suppression mechanism for a good gravel road. This is not a good gravel road without the proper base.
Thank you for that. Now, so for me to send it back, you would need me to defer this back to you, to come back to council with a revised quote?
Through the chair to Councillor Height, the tar and chip program, I believe, is shut down for the year. So if this was turned back, work couldn't proceed until likely next fall.
I'm okay with that, Mr. Chair, because here we have, again this week, sole source contracts. We have a purchasing policy for a reason, and here we go sidestepping it yet again. It seems every week I'm in here we sidestep this thing, and I'm going to move the motion, Mr. Mayor, that we defer this. It can get done in the spring. We could have staff come back and decide to tar and chip some parking lots. It's a big area down there. Maybe there'll be some cost savings when it's under a competitive bid process, or have our own county guys come in and do that. So that would be my motion.
So your motion would be to defer this,
Correct.
to bring back a quote on tar and chip?
Correct.
I'll need a seconder for a motion to defer. Is there a seconder? Councillor Geisens has seconded that this report be deferred and some more information be brought back. To the deferral, Councillor Wells, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and this will come as a surprise to everyone. I will not be supporting the deferral, even though it may be a saving as far as money is concerned. Mr. Mayor, these residents, these users, have been waiting for 25 years to have this job done. And every year, including when we were the city of Nanticoke, we kept saying, we're going to pave, we're going to pave, we're going to pave. 25 years later, we still haven't paved. The difference between this project and many other projects is that this is money that those people have put into a reserve for the upgrades of that marina. And surely they are entitled to payment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Think further, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will not support deferral of this. I was satisfied with the explanation I was given by staff as to why we need to asphalt what we're going to asphalt in order to have a smooth surface and a stable surface for the heavy boats to be moved up and down on. So I think under these circumstances, it was a good recommendation. While I agree with my colleague that we're asking for exemptions more frequently than we should be, I think clearly this, in a sense, is a subset of a tender that was already done. And we've hired the lowest bidder to do the other asphalt work, and this is simply an extension that they're granting us the same price to do this other little job. So I'm quite comfortable with it. I'd like to not defer. I'd like to make our decision tonight. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll read the motion. Councillor Height has moved. Councillor Geisens has seconded that report CSD 1733 be referred to staff for a further report outlining options such as chip and tar. Any final comments on the referral? I'll call the question. Those in favor? 3 those opposed. Motion is defeated. And we'll go back to the original motion, which is on page 135. I do not have a mover. I do now. Councillor Wells has moved. Councillor Oliver has seconded that we receive this report on the Port Dover Harbor Marina roadway paving as information. Be received, pardon me. And that council exempt staff from the quotation and tendering procedures for goods and services outlined in Norfolk County Policy EBS 02, Section 4 for single source supply with Dufferin Construction Company for the Port Dover Harbor Marina roadway paving in 2017. And that the General Manager of Community Services be authorized to execute a contract with Dufferin for the supply of the necessary labor, materials, equipment for the fine grading and paving of the Port Dover Harbor Marina in the amount of $82,557, which excludes the taxes. And further, that the funding for Phase 1 resurfacing marina roadways parking areas be from reserves, Mr. Johnson, if I may, or do you want to put some words to me?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was waiting for you to finish that sentence. Originally, that particular project was funded from debentures. However, that last resolution, it says areas be amended from the issuance of debentures to the Port Dover Marina Reserve Fund. So it is written correctly in the report.
Leave it the way it is,
Yes, Mr.
and
Mayor.
it'll come out of the reserve.
Correct.
I got it. Okay? Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'd like to do one more staff report and we'll have a break. Page 139, this is the tender results for the exterior heritage restoration of the Norfolk Arts Center. Lee Robinson, please.
Through the mayor to council, before you this evening is the retender results from the exterior heritage restorations for the Norfolk County Arts Center. Council will recall that staff previously brought something forward and was concerned with respect to the prices being over budget, et cetera. We felt that if we went back to the marketplaces with some changes to that contract document, we could get a more favorable tender to the county, and that we would allow us to pick and choose some of the work to ensure that we were able to maximize the parks funding grants that we had available to us. Staff are pleased to report that that is in fact what we were able to do with this. We had sufficient number of bids, and staff are recommending that the project be awarded to BRC Restoration Incorporated. There is a little bit of work that is being deleted from the original bid because we don't feel that there's sufficient time and sufficient money for them to actually be able to achieve it. And that has to do with the replacing of some of the storm windows, which we can undertake in future years and is not imperative. Whatever we can get done, Parks Canada will be funding that. So we will maximize the amount of budget available, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Lee. Questions to Lee? I'll start with Councillor Black and then Sonnenberg, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke, and through you to Lee. Just wondering about the time of year. Will this work be undertaken in winter? And if it is, will there be any problems associated with doing the work at wintertime?
Through the mayor to council, the tender as written was very specific that the work has to be completed by a certain date in March to meet the funding deadlines that we have with Parks Canada. Therefore, the contractor is aware of that. We did see on a couple of items some additional costs to be able to do that construction in the winter. We do feel, though, that's a good value for the money for us to be able to get this work done. And a few items that we have deleted to keep it under our budgeted amount is because we do feel that we would be paying higher costs to have it done in the winter, and we could potentially do it next year. So staff are confident with the work that we're putting forward to do this, that it will be able to be undertaken by the completion date required by Parks Canada.
Okay. Well, it is unfortunate that we couldn't do the work in the summer. I think it would be better, but the timelines don't dictate it. Second question would be, I would be interested to know what items we are doing. So could we get a staff memo that explains exactly what the work is that will be done?
Absolutely, we can certainly provide that. Generally speaking, the majority of the savings was with respect to the storm windows, and we will be redoing the two that are in extremely bad shape that are visible from the road, and some of the other ones can wait, but I can certainly provide that detailed information for you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting this. For $570,000, we're going to repair some windows, some woodwork, some masonry, a front portico, and a south porch. I asked a local builder what I could get if I gave him $570,000. He said, well, I'll start out with an acre lot and build you a 2,200 square foot house, complete with heating and central air, all the plumbing, all the electrical, a 2-car garage, high-end cupboards, flooring, and drapery, 4 bathrooms, a paved driveway. All the bells and whistles to make it the nicest house in Norfolk County. a complete building for the same price as a few of these repairs over here. This is ludicrous. It seems to me when these contractors see that, hey, Norfolk County is paying, they just add a zero to the price. It should be in the $57,000 range, not $570. This is way out of line. I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Height?
Mayor Luca, through you to Public Works. It says in here that Parks Canada is going to give us $276,500, and we're going to match that. So it's a 50-50, and for a total of $541,000. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to council, that is correct.
So it's 50-cent dollars basically to get a building repaired that's worth probably a little less than that, I'm assuming.
Due to the heritage features, et cetera, that's why we're eligible for the Parks Canada grant, and that's correct. It's about 50-cent dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke, through you to Lee. Lee, is the items that we're restoring, are they unit priced in the contract tender?
Through the chairman to council, there's a variety of ways that it was priced out depending on the item. We can't always do a unit price for certain.
I'm asking like her.
Every separate item is articulated separately. Some are done by a lump sum basis and some are done by a unit basis, depending on what the item is that we're doing. But the contract was not written as a lump sum basis. It was written as an itemized contract this time.
Okay, and I guess that's where I'm asking. I'm kind of wondering if we couldn't see that. That part of it tells me whether some of this has been inflated or not. You know, like when it says in here, I'm assuming restoration of windows, woodwork, masonry, and you said some of this is broken down. I'm just wondering if it sounds like a lot of money, and Councillor Sonnenberg certainly hit it on the head, but I wouldn't mind seeing some of that just to see if it's weighted anywhere.
Certainly, I'm sure after it's awarded that we can provide certain information with respect to that. There are 6 bids for this. And we are recommending the lower one. This is in keeping with the lines. We spoke with adjacent municipalities because obviously this is a funding program that Parks Canada has out. Everybody is seeing these types of prices. This is standard for heritage restoration work, which is what we're dealing with in this particular case. This is not brand new construction.
No, I realize that, but and that's where I'm concerned. Like, are some of the windows going to be done?
Through the chairman to council, yes.
Okay, and that's where I get concerned. I've watched restoration of windows on some of our heritage buildings, and it costs more, and I realize it may be heritage, but it costs more to restore some of these older windows than it does to put a brand new window in the building. So that's where I get wrapped up in some of this stuff. So.
Through the mayor to council, yes, part of this work was evaluating what the most cost-effective way of keeping with the heritage designation. So sometimes we can replace a window with a brand new window, and other times we have to fix a window. So we've looked at the most cost-effective way to do all this, acknowledging that much of the money that we're spending is due to the heritage designation and the carefulness in which they have to undertake. That it's not the same as just restoring another building that we have. The heritage designation does cause our cost to go up considerably.
Well, again, and I'm just asking for BRC restoration, if we accept their bid, if we could, I don't need to see all the rest, I'd just like to see their unit prices. Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg?
Just in case anyone's interested, I do understand preservation, I do understand heritage, I'm all for it. But at what cost? I think the Greeks stopped repairing the Parthenon after a while, and the Romans gave up on the Colosseum. How many centuries are we going to pour money into an old derelict building just because it's heritage? You know, on one hand we say, hey, we can't keep fixing the rec center. Tear it down and build a new one. But here we are, fix until the end of time. What's the difference? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I did hear Lee mention this. This was a competitive bid. We had 6 bidders, and this was the lowest bid. So we're not being gouged from that point of view. So, and Councillor Sonnenberg is correct. This is very expensive. However, that's the price. We went out, we have 6 different bids, and do you want the work done or don't you want it done? And if you want it done, this is what we have to spend. Thank you.
Anything further on the report? I need some direction. Councillor Black?
I'd like to move the recommendation contained in the report, and if there's a seconder, speak to it.
Thank you. Councillor Wells has seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Wells? Sorry, Councillor Black.
Oops. Thank you, Mayor Luke. And this work needs to be done. The building is falling apart. I wouldn't characterize it as Councillor Sonnenberg has as being derelict. It is a national treasure. It's nationally designated. It's being used by our arts, Linwood Arts, Norfolk Arts, and has been for quite some time. It's a very busy place. Like any older building, including this one that we're in, they must be maintained. And it is a little bit more costly to do restoration type work rather than brand new. We are getting 50% dollars, so the work is going to have to be done, or else you just let this property sit and rot. Now, I can't imagine us doing that. That would be totally irresponsible. So we have an opportunity to get 50% dollars. Why wouldn't we utilize that? And as Lee has indicated, we've had, how many, 6? Was it 6? Ranging from a low of $570 to a high of $751,000. So I would say that, these 6 individuals that are bidding, I haven't seen the others. So I would think that that's fair work. And we're accepting the lowest one. So, thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Moved by Black, seconded by Wells. That report, 1778, tender results, exterior heritage restoration Norfolk Arts Center be received. Further, that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk manager of council services to execute a contract with BRC Restoration, Inc. in the amount of $512,000 to undertake the exterior heritage restoration of the Norfolk Arts Center as specified PWFAC 17-27. Anything else? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We will break until 5:05. And we will start our public meeting, and then after the public meeting, we'll go back to our last staff report. Thank you.
On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road. You're bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my Southern County home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a Southern County home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger long. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a Southern County home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road. You're bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my Southern County home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests,